Hello everyone, this is Ange. So I generally like the visual novel database, and even support the creator's Patreon as he's been finally adding new features within the last year. However, I've always been kind of annoyed with the site, which I'll start calling VNDB, for being inconsistent with what's allowed as a visual novel entry on their site. For those who don't know what VNDB is, it's generally the go-to place to search for information related to visual novels online, whether it's the release date of the visual novel in its original country, when it got a fan or official translation, or various types of plot or character tropes that appear in the story. If you like anime, this is kind of like the visual novel version of something like My Anime List or AniList, or the visual novel version of something like IMDb for movies. Either way, VNDB does end up being a contributor to what people consider visual novels. So going to the main topic at hand, the big question is, what constitutes a visual novel? Is it the gameplay to reading ratio? Is it the type of gameplay that's included? Or how much the gameplay interferes with the reading? Is it a visual novel as long as it has the narration and a text box at the bottom and has a solid amount of story? Let's analyze some examples of what has gotten removed from VNDB and include any VNDB discussions if they exist and are relevant. The first visual novel I want to talk about is Zero Escape, Zero Time Dilemma. It's the last game in the Zero Escape trilogy, coming after 999 and Virtue's Last Reward. Why did this visual novel get removed from VNDB? I'm guessing it's because a good amount of the storytelling is done through cutscenes instead of the typical ADV style click a button to advance the text. Fair enough, but it's just weird that the rest of the series is still on VNDB and pretty gameplay heavy, and there are other games on VNDB that are cutscene heavy, which I'll get into later. The next visual novel I want to talk about is 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim. This is actually one of the more recent, bigger entries that got released and removed quickly from VNDB. I haven't personally played this one yet, but from what I've read and seen, it was removed because it seemed like it had a large amount of real-time strategy gameplay and cutscenes for its storytelling. As far as why it was on there in the first place, it looks like there are adventure game-like gameplay where you can advance the story and learn key words to get different story routes and options, kind of like a visual novel. Next up, we have Fate Grand Order. This is a gacha game, or a free-to-play mobile game that features new and old characters from the Fate series. It looks like it was removed because people disagreed with the heavy amount of gameplay it had regulated to the story. It got on VNDB to begin with, since the story sections did seem a lot more in-depth than your usual anime-like mobile game, and the story style is even visual novel-like. One thing that I think is amusing is that another Type Moon series has a fighting game visual novel spin-off that's been on VNDB forever, Melty Blood, with Tsukihime characters. Next up, we have gameplay dating sim crossovers like Long Live the Queen and Hunipop. Long Live the Queen is an otomege that is stat-based gameplay simulation and an option to choose one of many partners to marry during the epilogue. Hunipop has Bejeweled-like puzzle gameplay, along with some choices before it seems like you can sleep with a girl of your choice. Based on discussion threads, I'm guessing these two visual novels were deleted because people believe the gameplay to story ratio was way too high in the gameplay's favor. Might also be worth noting that both of these are Western-made games not made in Japan, so there could be a chance that may have been a factor. Now I want to talk about entries that are still on VNDB, where various people have debated of whether to consider these visual novels or not. The first series I want to talk about are related to both the Ace Attorney and Danganronpa series. Both of them are heavy story-based games that have a degree of detective mystery gameplay to it. Ace Attorney series has a classic point-and-click adventure feel, where you have to gather evidence when not in court, and present the right evidence to advance the story during court. Danganronpa similarly has multiple modes, a slice-of-life mode where you can gain affection with various characters, one where you gather evidence through school to present for the class trial, and the class trial itself, where you have real-time minigames while the characters are figuring out who the culprit is. People seem to consider these visual novels because they have narration and the ADV click button to advance the text style. But I've seen arguments that these aren't visual novels because of how much gameplay they have, similar to reasons why 13 Sentinels and Fate Grand Order were removed. The next series I want to talk about is Tonelico. This is a very interesting case, as this is mostly known as a turn-based Japanese RPG series. However, it looks like the main reason these are considered visual novels for VNDB standards is because they have a dive system where you enter a character's mind to help with their inner doubts visual novel style and unlock song magic. I suppose these instances must appear often to be considered a visual novel, when stuff like Persona 3 through 5 have social links or confidant scenes which could be considered visual novel-esque but are not on VNDB at all. Speaking of the Persona series, a few Persona 4 spin-offs are on VNDB, including Persona 4 Dancing All Night, Persona 4 Arena, and its sequel, Persona 4 Arena Ultimax. But as said earlier, the original Persona 4 is not on VNDB in any way. Apparently, the original Persona 4 has too much JRPG-like gameplay to be considered a visual novel, despite having a social link mode, which is kinda like a visual novel. But a rhythm game with a visual novel-ish story and a fighting game with a visual novel-ish story counts enough. The last series I want to talk about are strategy game and visual novel blends like the Rance and Urawaru Mono series. The Rance series is an interesting one, as it has 10 games, but with various type of gameplay genres ranging from turn-based strategies to even dungeon crawlers. The Urawaru Mono series is a little more straightforward, all three being strategy RPG and visual novel story hybrids. Now the question is why games like these are considered visual novels, while something like, say, Fire Emblem would probably never be allowed on VNDB despite similar traits? Is the story content ratio just that much higher in stuff like Rance and Urawaru Mono? There are more series I could talk about, but I'll leave it at these for now. VNDB is generally a good site to learn about visual novels, but these inconsistencies of what's considered a visual novel is something I think the site admins and mods should look more into. What are your thoughts on how VNDB handles what's considered a visual novel? Do you think they do a good job, or could there be improvement? What is your minimum for you consider something a visual novel? Feel free to leave your opinion in the comments below. See you all in the next video.